Hey guys, it's Becky with Design Bundles, and today I am here to talk to you about my 10 favorite Cricut hacks, or if you don't want to call them hacks, they can be tips and tricks. Regardless, it is my 10 favorite things to pass on to Cricut beginners. So now this is true. You see I have a Cricut Maker, all right, but this is going to be applicable to all of your Cricut machines. And none of these are hard fast. If you are doing something that is working for you already, then by all means, I'm not here to interrupt that for you. But especially if you're struggling or you haven't started yet, hopefully this advice will save you some heartache. First and foremost, let me also disclose that, especially Cricut ladies, I know you guys are die-hard Cricut fans. That is okay. I am not here to tell you to do anything different, okay? But there are probably going to be some things on this list that we disagree on, and that's okay. It's completely okay. All right, so let's get started, because my number one is going to be, unfortunately, not to use, or maybe just not to rely on Cricut vinyl and transfer tape. So a lot of times when I'm on social media and people are having problems with their vinyl project, it usually comes back to the type of vinyl that they're working with, and a lot of times that is the Cricut vinyl or the Cricut transfer tape. So my personal favorite is to use the Orcal 651. There are a lot of online vendors that carry it, and really nowadays there's more and more local stores that are popping up that carry it as well. In addition to that, I like the Or tape. That may not be everybody's favorite, so you can definitely check out a few that are available. But I do want to try to steer you away from the clear contact paper, okay? Now, again, a lot of people really like the clear contact paper. It's just not my favorite. It seemed like anytime I tried to use it, especially if it was a project that I was really relying on, then the clear transfer tape would let me down, or the clear contact paper would let me down. So, transfer tape just isn't that expensive. I would bite the bullet and invest in finding a good transfer tape that you like, and then also at least experimenting with other brands of vinyl rather than the Cricut vinyl, okay? Number two is going to be along the same lines. I feel that way about Cricut replacement blades. They just seem really expensive to me, and I'm just a really frugal crafter. So as soon as I found out that I could get replacement blades on Amazon, that is kind of all I've used since then. So I haven't had any problems with them, and they are a significant amount cheaper than buying the Cricut brand blades. So, just check them out, give it some thought, and see if they work for you, okay? Now, number three is going to be about the weeding tool. Now, once again, I know a lot of people like the Cricut tools, and that's a-okay, but there are other tools available to you. Now, I personally use a pair of fine tip weeding tweezers. You'll see me using that in all my videos. Another thing that people talk about is called a pen, and it is essentially a sewing needle, or maybe it's an embroidery needle. Don't quote me on that, but it's a needle that is inserted into a mechanical pencil. Okay, and basically what it gives you is a really sharp pencil that you can stab the vinyl with. All right, so that's something that's quick and easy that you could make at your house, but the weeding tweezers are also very inexpensive, and they're just a personal favorite of mine. So some people also talk about dental tools from Harbor Freight. I have not personally tried those, but at least they're really inexpensive to try, and just something else you can keep in mind. So since we're talking about weeding, let's go ahead and talk about weeding boxes. Now, a weeding box is a square that you put around your design, and in Cricut Design Space, that means that you need to attach them together. And what it's for is so that when you weed, you only have to weed what's inside that square. So it lets you know, hey, this is your entire design right here. And then it also makes it easier so you don't have this huge piece of vinyl that you're trying to peel up at one time. Also, it speaks to the frugal crafter in me, because it lets me save the rest of the vinyl that is on that sheet so that I can reuse it again later. Now, speaking of cutting, my next tip, unfortunately, Cricut users are at a little bit of a disadvantage because you guys don't have a test cut feature. We don't have a test cut feature. So, that is a big draw for me. I always recommend doing a test cut. And in your case, what I would do is in the upper top corner of your cutting mat, I would make and maybe keep a B located there, an uppercase B. It doesn't have to be any special font, but the whole point of having the test cut there is that you can cut a teeny tiny little piece of whatever material you're cutting to test out your cut settings. That way you don't cut your entire design only to get to the end of it and find out that your cut settings were not successful. They were not deep enough or too deep and that sort of thing. So it can really save you a lot of heartache. Like I said, just that letter B, I use an uppercase B, and your whole point would be to be able to pull the B out but leave the inside of the letters intact. Okay, so keep that in mind, give it a try, let me know what you think. A friend of mine actually shared that with me, and I think it really will save you guys a lot of heartache in test cutting your materials first. So another tip is, I know a lot of beginner Cricut users get confused about print and cut because the print and cut area is significantly smaller than what your normal letter size sheet would be. Now the print and cut area is 6.75 inches wide by 9.25 inches high. So what that means is draw yourself a box. Draw a rectangle, square, whatever you want to call it, and input those dimensions on there so that you know whatever you're positioning to be able to print and cut needs to fit within that box. Now, just as a side note, a little extra tip for you, I do that with all of my materials. Rather, all of my blanks, all of my substrates, whatever you want to call them, except for shirts. But if I'm cutting something for an 8x10 canvas, I will go ahead and draw an 8x10 rectangle on my area and then fit my design inside of it. So whether you're doing it for print and cut or whether you're doing it to determine your cut size, I just always recommend it, and you can delete it after you're done, or hey, you could even use that as your weeding box. So it's completely up to you. Now let's talk about files. As a beginner, I know it's really overwhelming, all this extra stuff that you got to buy. You thought, hey, I'll buy a Cricut machine and everything will be good. And then you find out you have to buy all these materials and all these tools. Well, the last thing you need to worry about is buying files. Now, I have found that a lot of Cricut users feel like they have to either subscribe to Cricut Access or, purchase files from the Cricut store. And fortunately for you, that is not true. And of course, Design Bundles has a whole section of free files available for you. So I definitely recommend checking those out because they're adding free files all the time. And if you just make sure to watch either their social media or just check out their page every week, you can go through and grab all those free files for yourself. And even better, they come with commercial use licenses, which you usually don't get from a lot of free files. So make sure you add that to your weekly to-do list. Now moving on the list, talking about making things inexpensive, I always recommend for beginners to start with items from their local dollar store. So I know here local to me, I can find wine glasses, I can find clear cutting boards. If I want to mess with HTV, I can find socks. Yes, socks. They're surprisingly fun to work with. I can also find oven mitts. So there's a lot of really neat stuff. And just set yourself a budget. Give yourself, say, $10. I mean, I know your internal self doesn't like budgeting, but let's keep it in line because these are really just your play items. There's nothing worse about a failed project than to know that you spent a lot of money on it. So, knowing that you can practice on the cheap is really, really important for starting out with your crafting journey. So next on the list, now this may surprise you guys, but you can use heat transfer vinyl, not just on shirts and apparel. You can use HTV on anything that can withstand the heat. Okay, now why am I telling you that as a beginner? Well, because a lot of beginners want to jump into like wood signs and reverse canvases and that sort of thing, and they get frustrated because adhesive vinyl does not naturally stick to those surfaces. Adhesive vinyl is great for glass and acrylic and that sort of thing, but sometimes you can struggle putting them on a canvas or putting them on a piece of wood. Well, fortunately for you, you can now use heat transfer vinyl for any of those things, and especially if you grabbed yourself a Cricut Easy Press, it makes it that much easier because sometimes wood can be difficult to fit inside your heat press, okay? So last but not least, it's important to know, because a lot of people feel limited in Cricut Design Space, that you can design in other softwares. Now that doesn't mean that you have to, but if you like Photoshop, or if you are coming over from Silhouette and you already know Silhouette Studio, maybe you like Affinity Designer, or maybe you draw on your iPad, just whatever works for you, know that you can, anything that you can save as a SVG, PNG, JPEG, those sorts of images, you can import them and use them, and it's really a lot easier to at least get started until you feel more comfortable in the software. So guys, I'm going to wrap it up, but I really appreciate you joining me today. Hopefully I was able to share with you some useful tips and tricks that you will implement into your crafting arsenal, or maybe that'll just make things a little bit easier on you. I always joke that I specialize in beginners, so that's really how I feel. I help you any way that I can. If you have any questions or comments about your machine, about the software, any little thing, make sure you leave those below, because I do come back and I personally read those and respond to you and check in with you, make sure you're doing okay. I appreciate you watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We always have a lot of really great tutorials and crafts planned for you. So I really appreciate you guys again. Thanks a lot, and I will see you next time.